The website that wouldn't close. My name is Alex, and I'm a freelance web developer. Or at least, I was. Now I'm not so sure what I am. My life used to revolve around logic. Around the clean, predictable syntax of code. If a line was broken, you could find the error. If a server failed, you could trace the point of failure. Everything had a reason, a cause, and an effect. I built my world on that certainty. A high-rise apartment in a city that hummed with the constant, reassuring thrum of life and electricity. I lived alone, but I was never lonely. The internet was my companion. The glow of my triple monitor setup my perpetual dawn. My most productive hours were late at night, when the city outside my panoramic window softened to a tapestry of distant, glittering lights, and the world went quiet. It was in these deep, silent hours that I did my best work, fueled by black coffee and the satisfying click-clack of my mechanical keyboard. My apartment, a converted industrial loft with exposed brick walls and high ceilings, was my sanctuary. It was spacious, minimalist, and, most importantly, secure. I had a state-of-the-art security system, not because I was paranoid, but because I appreciated good technology. I was a man who understood the digital world, and I had taken every precaution to be its master, not its victim. The story of how my world unraveled begins, as so many digital nightmares do, with a crash. It wasn't a spectacular failure. No sparks, no smoke, just a sudden, jarring blue screen on my main monitor during a routine data transfer. The error code was one I'd never seen before. A jumbled string of characters that looked less like a diagnostic and more like a ransom note written in a dead language. A hard reboot was all it took to get things running again. Everything seemed fine. My files were intact. My system diagnostics came back clean. I wrote it off as a fluke. A 1 in a million cosmic ray flipping a bit in my RAM. A ghost in the machine. A phrase I used to use lightly. The first anomaly appeared the next day. A new bookmark in my browser. It was in a folder I hadn't created, simply titled, Links. The bookmark itself had no name. Just a stark, black favicon. When I hovered my mouse over it, the URL appeared at the bottom of the screen. _Erebos. Void. A strange, top-level domain I'd never heard of. I tried to delete it. I right-clicked, hit, delete, and it vanished. I felt a brief prickle of unease. My system was locked down. Nothing should be able to write a file, let alone a bookmark, without my permission. I ran a full deep scan for malware, rootkits, anything that could explain it. The results came back negative. My fortress was, by all accounts, unbreached. I shrugged it off, deleted the empty links folder, and got back to work. The incident filed away as a strange but harmless system glitch. That night, I was debugging a particularly nasty piece of code for a client. The hours bled together, the coffee grew cold, and the city outside fell into its deepest slumber. I happened to glance at the clock on my monitor. 2:12 a.m. As the numbers ticked over to 2:13 a.m. My monitors flickered, all three of them, in perfect sync. For a single second, they went black, and then returned to normal. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Then I saw it. The links folder was back in my bookmarks bar. And inside it, the nameless bookmark with the black favicon. This time, I didn't try to rationalize it. This was something else. My curiosity, that damnable, professional itch that drives every programmer, took over. What was this thing? A persistent piece of malware? An elaborate prank by a fellow coder? Against my better judgment, I moved the cursor over the bookmark. The URL was the same. _Erebos. Void. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked. The page that loaded was the antithesis of the modern internet. There were no ads, no trackers, no flashy graphics. It was a void, a perfect, featureless black that swallowed the light from my screen. In the center, in a simple, white, sans serif font, were two words. Let's see. There was a cursor blinking patiently beneath the text, as if it were a prompt. It wasn't a button. It wasn't a link. It was just text. I hesitated for a long time. The only sounds in the vast, silent apartment, the hum of my server rack and the frantic beating of my own heart. What was I seeing? Was this a threat? An invitation? My logical mind screamed at me to close the tab, to shut down the computer, to unplug it from the wall. But the part of me that had been drawn to the mysteries of code since I was a teenager, the part that loved to peel back layers and see what made things tick, was in control. I clicked on the words. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the blackness resolved into an image. It was a video feed, grainy and flickering slightly, like an old security camera. There was no sound. The image was dark, illuminated only by the soft, multicolored glow of computer monitors. My monitors. I felt a wave of cold wash over me, so intense it felt like stepping into a walk-in freezer. The video was a live feed of my own office, my own room. I could see the back of my head, my shoulders slumped forward, my hand resting on the mouse. I could see my coffee mug, the steam long gone. I could see the poster for a vintage sci-fi film on the far wall, the stacks of technical manuals on my bookshelf, the neatly bundled cables running from my PC. But it was the angle that made the blood drain from my face. The camera was positioned high in the corner of the room, near the ceiling, looking down at me. It was a corner where my exposed brick wall met the heavy industrial concrete of the ceiling. There was nothing there, no camera, no wires, no lens, no conceivable place to hide even the smallest of devices. I had designed this space. I knew every inch of it. I slowly, deliberately, turned my head to look up at that corner. It was empty, just rough, red brick and gray concrete, shadowed and stark. I whipped my head back to the screen. On the video feed, the figure of me turned its head, looked up at the corner, and then whipped its head back to its screen. It was a live feed. It was happening right now. My first thought was a hack. Someone had compromised my webcam. But my webcam was built into the top bezel of my central monitor. And it had a physical shutter, which was currently closed. I reached up and my fingers confirmed the slide was in place. Even if it were open, the angle would be head-on, not from a god's eye view high in the corner. Had they hidden a camera? I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the polished concrete floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. On the screen, my video self stood up too. I grabbed a flashlight from my desk drawer, its beam cutting a sharp, nervous circle in the dim light. I scanned the corner, every brick, every seam in the mortar, every inch of the ceiling. Nothing, not a pinhole, not a scuff mark, not a single sign of intrusion. It was impossible, utterly, physically impossible. Panic began to set in, hot and acidic in the back of my throat. I stumbled back to my desk and frantically tried to close the tab. I clicked the X. Nothing happened. The video feed flickered, but remained. I tried to close the browser. The application wouldn't respond. I brought up the task manager to force quit the process. I found the browser, hit End Task, and the window vanished. For a glorious second, I felt a wave of relief. It was just a malicious script, a browser hijack. I had control again. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, the browser window snapped back into existence on my screen, already open to the !Erebos, void page. The video feed was still there, a silent, malevolent eye looking down at me. The figure on the screen had my exact posture of momentary relief, followed by a new, slumping wave of despair. I didn't hesitate this time. I reached down and held the power button on my PC case until the lights died and the fans spun down. Silence. Blessed, total silence. The 3 monitors went black, plunging the room into near total darkness, save for the distant, indifferent city lights. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, my silhouette framed against the window, staring at the blank screens. I felt watched. The feeling was palpable, a physical pressure in the air, a tingling on the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the image of that video feed, that impossible perspective. It was a violation of the fundamental laws of my world. My safe space, my sanctuary, had been breached by something that didn't play by the rules. I eventually went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the old building settle, every creak and groan magnified into a potential threat. I kept my eyes fixed on the corner of the room, waiting for a red light to appear, for some sign of a physical presence. There was nothing. The next day was a blur of paranoid activity. I unplugged the PC entirely. I took my laptop to a coffee shop to work. But I couldn't focus. The ambient noise of the cafe, usually a comforting backdrop, felt grating and loud. Every person who walked behind me sent a jolt of anxiety through my system. I felt exposed, vulnerable. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different, colder. I left the lights on. All of them, trying to banish the shadows that now seemed to pool in the corners with a new and menacing depth. I avoided my office, working instead on the kitchen island. But my eyes kept drifting to the doorway of that room, expecting to see something. I knew I had to face it. I was a man of logic. There had to be an explanation. A new type of wireless hacking device. Something that projected a signal? It sounded like science fiction. But it was more plausible than the alternative. That night, I forced myself to wait. I watched the clock. Backquote 2:10 backquote. Backquote 2:11 backquote. Backquote 2:12 backquote. As the digits flipped to backquote 2:13 a.m. backquote, I was holding my breath. Nothing happened. The room remained quiet. My powered-down PC remained inert. A small, hysterical laugh escaped my lips. Had I imagined it? A stress-induced hallucination? The product of too many sleepless nights and too much caffeine? The relief was so profound it made me dizzy. It was a mistake. I had beaten it. The relief lasted for 2 days. I started to feel normal again. The apartment began to feel like my own. The fear subsided into the memory of a bad dream. On the third night, feeling confident, I decided I needed to get back to work in my office. I sat down at my desk, plugged in the PC, and powered it on. The machine booted up normally. The desktop appeared. All my icons were in place. And then, before I could even open a program, the browser launched itself. And the backquote Erebos, void backquote page loaded. My blood ran cold. The video feed snapped into view. There I was, sitting at my desk, my face illuminated by the screen. A mask of dawning horror. And the time stamp on the video feed? It wasn't the current time. It was backquote 2:13 a.m. backquote. From 2 nights ago. It was a recording. It had recorded me, even when the machine was powered off and unplugged. I stared. Mesmerized and horrified, I watched my video self sit there for almost an hour before getting up and leaving the room. The video feed didn't stop. It just continued to show the empty room. An empty chair, silent monitors, watching, waiting. This is when my systematic approach truly began. I wasn't just dealing with a hacker anymore. This was something else entirely. I reformatted my primary hard drive. A clean wipe. I reinstalled the operating system from a trusted source. The moment the OS installation was complete and connected to the internet, the black bookmark appeared. I tried booting from a live Linux USB stick, a completely separate and clean environment. The moment I opened the browser on that temporary OS, the bookmark was there. It wasn't in my computer. It felt like it was in my network. My router. I replaced the router with a brand new one. The bookmark appeared. It was tied to me, to my physical location. The fear now was a constant companion, a low hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. I started to lose track of time. I barely ate. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, because I was terrified of what might happen when I wasn't watching the watcher. The video feed was always on now. I couldn't close it, so I minimized it, tucking it away in the corner of my screen. A small, square window into my own prison. A constant reminder that I was being observed from that impossible, empty corner. Sometimes, I would maximize it and just watch. I'd watch the empty room, looking for a clue, a flicker of movement, anything. One night, I saw it. A book on my bookshelf, one I hadn't touched in years, was slightly ajar. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it had been closed flat the day before. I got up, walked over to the bookshelf, my eyes darting between the physical book and the one on the screen. They were identical. I reached out a trembling hand and pushed it shut. On the screen, my hand appeared and did the same. The entity, whatever it was, could interact with my world. The last vestiges of my rational mind began to crumble. I was living in a haunted fishbowl. The isolation I had once cherished now felt like a tomb. The silence of the apartment was no longer peaceful, it was heavy with unspoken threat. I started hearing things, a soft scratching sound, seeming to come from the walls. I'd tell myself it was pipes. The building settling. But sometimes, very late at night, I would hear a whisper. A single, sibilant sound, like someone exhaling. That seemed to come from the exact corner where the camera was supposed to be. I had to do something. I couldn't live like this. My logical mind, battered and bruised, came up with one final, desperate plan. I would catch it. I would prove it was real. Or I would prove I was insane. I bought a high-resolution motion-activated camera. The best I could find. I set it up on a tripod, pointing directly at the haunted corner. I positioned it so that both the corner and my desk were in the shot. My plan was simple. I would sit at my desk with the Erebos. Vol.feed open on my laptop. My new camera would record the corner. If something was there, my camera would capture it. The night I set it up, the air in the apartment felt electric, thick with anticipation. I sat down, the laptop open in front of me. The cursed video feed displayed in all its grainy horror. I could see myself, a tense figure hunched over a glowing screen. And I could see the corner behind me. My own camera was on. Its little red light a reassuring beacon of my own technology. For hours, nothing happened. The silence stretched on, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I watched the feed on my laptop. I saw myself watching the feed. A terrifying, recursive loop of surveillance. Then, on the Erebos feed, I saw something. It wasn't a figure. It wasn't a monster. It was a distortion. In the corner of the room, the air seemed to shimmer, to warp, like heat haze rising from asphalt on a summer day. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, a slight bending of the light around the bricks, a wavering in the fabric of reality itself. It had no shape, no form, but it was there, and as I stared, I realized it was slowly, almost imperceptibly, growing more defined. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had it. I tore my eyes from the laptop and looked at the playback screen of my own high-tech camera. The corner was empty. I rewound the footage, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the controls. I played it back frame by frame. On my camera, the one I had set up, the one I trusted, there was nothing, just brick and concrete, no shimmer, no distortion, no presence. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The thing in the corner, the watcher, was only visible through its own cursed lens. It existed in a dimension, a layer of reality, that only the Erebos, website could see. My technology was blind to it. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest. I was beaten. There was no way to prove it, no way to fight it, no way to even properly see it. It had shown me the truth, but only through a window I could never close, and no one else could ever look through. Defeated, I slumped in my chair, staring at the laptop screen, at the shimmering anomaly in the corner. And then I noticed something else. Something new. On the brick wall in the video feed, just below the distortion, was a mark, a small, dark scratch in the mortar. Thin as a hair. It hadn't been there before. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, I stood up and walked to the real, physical wall. I ran my fingers over the rough brick, my eyes scanning frantically, and there it was, a fresh scratch in the mortar. It was shallow, but it was unmistakably real. I could feel the crumbling edge of it under my fingertip. The barrier was gone. It wasn't just watching anymore. It could touch. I don't know how long I stood there, touching that impossible scratch. The fight has gone out of me. The website is open on my laptop right now as I write this. I tried destroying the laptop once. I took a hammer to it in a fit of rage. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass. I threw it in a dumpster 5 blocks away. The next morning, it was sitting on my desk, fully repaired, not a scratch on it. The Erebos feed patiently waiting. It's a part of me now. Or maybe I'm a part of it. I don't sleep. I just sit here, in my silent apartment, with the city lights twinkling outside. I feel like a specimen in a jar. Sometimes, I hear the whispering grow louder, almost forming words I can't quite understand. The shimmering in the corner is more distinct now, less like heat haze and more like a smudge of darkness against the wall. A patch of night that the light from my lamps cannot touch. I'm writing this all down because it's the only thing I have left to do. The only act of defiance I can think of. A message in a bottle, thrown from a digital island. A warning. I just glanced at the feed on my laptop. I can see my back. My fingers moving across this keyboard. But on the screen, in that grainy, silent video, my fingers are typing different words. I look down at my own hands, at what I am actually typing, and my blood turns to ice. They match the words on the cursed screen. I thought this story was my own, my last act of control. But it's not. The patch of darkness in the corner of the feed is pulsing. Very gently, and I have the sudden, chilling certainty that this story isn't my warning to you. It's the website's invitation, and by reading this, you've just clicked the link. You've just told it. Backquote, let's see backquote.